The American Legion is doing interviews of veterans that are residents of Anderson Island. And right now it's my pleasure to introduce James Altemus, who is an American Legion member of Post 265. And would you like to introduce yourself? Or?
Okay, I'm Jim Altemus, and I came here in 2006. We lived in Florida for 20 years, and we battled all the storms and hurricanes. And they didn't do much damage, nothing that wasn't irreplaceable. Till 2005, we had a storm that did over $100,000 worth of damage to my house. Allstate, bless their hearts, paid every penny. But Joni said, I've had enough. We weren't in the house. I think it was about 7 months. We had to be living in hotels with the pets and everything because we couldn't live at the house. It was condemned. And there were big cracks down the ceiling. Water came through the roof, so we had to take all the insulation out. And these guys came, they were mold remeters. And they had this big fan, and they were sucking the insulation out. The guy would throw it toward the fan, he'd duck upstairs. Every now and then we hear a thump. I said, what is this? He says, rats. He says, they won't bother you anymore. Okay. Yeah, it was a struggle. We had, the whole thing had to be redone. Walls had to be, because there was black mold in the house from all the wetness and everything. And all the walls had to be scrubbed down, disinfected, repainted, new stove. Once during the whole thing, we had gone out of town, and the power had gone out, and it tripped. It was a bad storm, and it tripped all the circuit breakers. So when everything tripped back, it was like a brownout. Mine didn't kick back on. And I got home and my freezer had exploded. And I had orange juice everywhere and lemonade everywhere, and the meat was all spoiled and blood running down the front. And I called my agent, I said, what can I do? She says, go get another one, send me the bill. Stock it with food, sell me that bill. You lost the food, right? Yeah. Send me the bill. Clean it up, send me the bill, go get a new one. Easy buy. Allstate was real good to us. Joni liked to watch late night television. I worked at night, and I'd get home anywhere from 11 to 4 or later, working night shift. We were always getting jobs come in at the last minute. I need this overnight. And said, yeah, okay. I was an offset stripper as a printer for about 20 years. And I did some press work and some binder work, and I was offset, and I made camera work and all kinds of parts of the business. I got into management once. I got out of that as fast as I could. I didn't mind being a supervisor as long as it was hourly wage, but these guys, once they get you on salary, they think they own you. And they work you all kinds of crazy hours, and you're getting a single paycheck, and you look down about a month later and you realize you're making $2.50 an hour. And you're there from 6 in the morning to 8 at night. Something's wrong with this situation. So I got out of that. But Joni liked to watch late night television. She'd go to bed when Jesse went to bed at school, Jesse, my daughter, and she'd wake up and wait for me, and I come home and I'd eat something and go to bed, and she'd say, I'm gonna watch television, so okay. Our time was normally in the morning, because when Jessie got up for school, I got up with her. And then I could have breakfast with her before going to school, because I wouldn't see her again until I got home. And it worked out for us pretty good. The school was like 2 doors down, so she could just walk to school. And the Florida weather, as far as I was concerned, was great. It was hot, it was muggy, but we only live 15 minutes from the Gulf of Mexico. If we were unhappy, all we had to do was take a picnic lunch and go out to the sand, and we could be, it's very cool right there. I used to go out and watch the surf bunnies. They were much better than I was. I get out, I'm too old to surf anymore. She was watching late night television, and she saw this guy on the television. He was pictures of Anderson Island, and come up and see the place, and we'll send you 2 nights in the hotel, and we'll pay your airfare, everything. So she said, let's go and look. And I said, well, where's the thing? She said, it'll be on tonight. So I looked at it and I went, you really don't want to stay here, huh? She says, no, I've had enough. I gotta go somewhere, but I'm not staying here. All right, so we figured from St. Petersburg, Florida, all the way up to Washington. Yeah, that'll be a change. We both grew up in Maryland, so winter storms were nothing new to us. We got some hellacious blizzards, and we live right outside of Washington, D.C. And when it snows there, it snows like 8 or 10 feet sometimes. It drifts, and a lot of people think, oh, well, you don't get any snow here because you're right on the water. We're on the Potomac River, about 20 miles from the Potomac River. And it snows everywhere. The river freezes over, the kids skate and have fun with hockey and race up and down the ice. And everybody else curses the snow because there's all kinds of accidents and you can't get anywhere, people stop. And we've had snow so bad, people just leave their cars in the middle of the road and walk home. And we had a townhouse at one storm, and I called her up, I walked home, and left my store at the liquor store, my truck at the liquor store. Guy calls me up the next morning, he says, did you leave your truck here last night? Yeah. He says, man, I thought somebody stole it and left it here. I said, no. I couldn't get up the hill. The traffic was 4 cars deep, and after I sat in that line for 20 minutes without moving, I said, the hell with this. So I parked my car and walked home. It was only half a mile. And then the next morning I went down, got my car, and went to work. But D.C. is famous for its ice storms. Famous, infamous, something or other. They have sleet and ice in February, every February, and it's nasty. And it's worse than driving on straight ice because it makes you think nothing's wrong. You can feel the wheels grabbing, and then all of a sudden they start to slide. And the stuff comes down, it gets on your windows, and your windshield's all fogging up. I walked to work one day in one of those storms. I walked about 4 miles to work. And they had this parking lot that went up on the slope of about 30, 35 degrees. And I got there, and the place I was working at was at the top of the hill, so I kind of scudded up the parking lot. It was all full of ice. And I kept slipping back, and I wasn't getting anywhere, so this guy come around behind me, come up to the top of the parking lot and drove in and came across, and I stopped what I was doing. I was watching him. And there were 2 big buildings together, and the roadway went up between them for the trucks to get in. And he went up this front, back down a little bit, and I saw his brake light go on, and I heard his tires leave the pavement and just go shh as he slid on the ice. Well, this other guy had left his '59 Chevy there all night because he didn't want to drive it in the snow. The car that was sliding hit his car and stopped. But if you know anything about billiards, you'd know that the other car started moving. And if you know anything about '59 Chevys, they have these great big fins on them. Well, this thing starts heading for me. I start running. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm on the ice. And this thing is just sliding. And I'm in slow motion. heading right for me. Jesus, this thing's gonna kill me. I dive onto this snow berm, and it hit right where I was standing and ricocheted down the parking lot, crashed into a tree. And my boss is up the top of the hill. Jesus, you crazy? Right. He says, walk up the center. There's a trickle of water where it won't be frozen. So I walked all the way up there. Then I got, maybe 3 feet from work, put up my foot and slipped. I landed right here. Ended up with 16 stitches. But when I landed, I slid all the way down the parking lot. A real comedy of errors, except for the stitches. So I got all the stitches and I went home because I couldn't go back to work. Working on the printing press was just killing me. And my boss said, just stay home till you have no more headaches, because I can't have you working if you're going to be working with headaches. I said, okay. So I stayed home for 2 days and then went back to work. But mostly what happened as far as my military career, I graduated from high school in 1968, and it was around Washington was a very tumultuous time. You had people who were for the war, people who were against the war, people who didn't care about the war, and then you had others down there who had diplomatic immunity. They couldn't be drafted, they couldn't be arrested. They were running around smoking dope all over the place, giving cocaine out at parties, and the cops couldn't do anything about it. And it was so goofy, but all the kids that were in high school with me were obviously against the war because they were going to be graduating in the year. And everybody knew that if you didn't have a good setup after high school, you were going to get drafted. And if you got drafted, there was only one place for you to go, and that's in light weapons infantry, and you're going to Vietnam. A buddy of mine got drafted, and he came over one night and says, I'm going to Germany. I said, you got Germany? That's great. He called me up about 3 months later. He says, come down and see me. I said, well, where are you? He says, I'm in Walter Reed Hospital. I thought you went to Germany. Well, I was in Germany about a month, and they sent the whole division to Vietnam. I said, see, I warned you. You can't trust these guys. So, my U.S. history teacher was a real hippie, and she was a smart girl. But she was against the war, and we had anti-war posters all up around the classroom, playing music to fit the times. Some of it was drug-oriented, some of it was just anti-war, some of it was just having fun. But there was always some kind of music going on in the class, and we broke up into groups and studied the war. This is U.S. history in the making. And I remember going down to Pentagon with a girl I knew, and all the girls were out there putting daisies in the soldiers' rifles. And they made the cover of Time magazine, and they said, this is what people think about the war in Vietnam. They sent the soldiers out to guard the building, and nobody cared. They put their flowers down, and they left. The downside of it is in the evening time, just about dinner time, everybody watched the news. And they had shots from Vietnam, shots from the schools where the kids were taking over the universities and complaining. They wanted the schools a safe zone. All the kids in college got what was called a 2S deferment, which meant you were a student, you couldn't be drafted. There was a trick to that, if you were good. A lot of these guys that had gone ahead and in their junior years had got involved in the movement, and they took over part of the administration building or the library, and they were having to sit in and playing music and singing songs and eating sandwiches. And National Guard got called more than once, and they came on the campus and put everything back right. And they do it again, they say, well, we don't want to go through this anymore, so because you have broken the law by taking over the university, we're going to call that live insurrection, and you're now 1A, draft eligible. So they got to stop the war for about 15 minutes. And then it came and knocked her in that door. Well, I went over, talked to a buddy of mine who was a printer, and he said he went through the Army school. Well, I was taking graphics in high school, and I thought this would be a good career. I didn't think much about the war. I figured I'd get out, get a job, take an apprenticeship with the union, and they protect me from the war, which they did. If you were a journeyman in the union, you didn't go. You were necessary people. I mean, they might transfer you out to a job that you do in the rear, but they don't send you to combat because your union needs you to come back. And there was a big deal with unions. And that was my plan. Well, my buddy told me, he said, what you do is you go in the Army, instead of joining up for 2 years, which is the shortest enlistment, he says, join for 3 years and you'll get your school. Because by then you'll figure if you get this school, you'll join up for another 6 years. Because it's good duty. They'll send you all over the world printing the Stars and Stripes and printing the division newspapers and all that stuff. And that's what I wanted to do. So I went in, joined up in September. I wasn't going to screw up the summer. I had my last filling, and I had a ball. But in September, I went and I signed up. And for 3 years, and the guy says, okay, he says, I can pretty much guarantee your school. So they sent me down to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. In September, North Carolina is still hot, and it's nasty. And Fort Bragg is on a big sandbox, and the sand gets into everything. And you ran. You ran two things, you ran from things, you ran back, you did it again, and it didn't matter where you went, you ran. And the guy who we had for a drill sergeant, he didn't like long hair, so we got haircuts every week. And the barbers there had it great because they never swept the floor. They had hoses attached to their hair clippers and vacuumed just the hair right up. So they had an easy job. And we were burning up uniforms like crazy, crawling in the mud and the dirt and running through the woods and stuff. These guys learned how to march and salute and make a right turn and a left turn, and they learned how to get hungry on cue, because when it was time to eat, you ate, and when it was time to eat, if you didn't eat, you didn't get to eat till the next time around. There was no snacks. We had guys who would sneak off to the PX and get a hoagie or something when they got caught, and I say when they got caught, because they always got caught. As soon as somebody found out they're going, bring me this or bring me that, okay. They'd come back, and word would get around that the hoagies had come down, and drill sergeants come to these guys and say, how stupid can you be? Now you're going to get an Article 15. Well, suppose I don't want it. Well, I'll give you a court-martial. No, I'll take the Article 15. And normally what it was they withheld a third of your pay for 6 months, and they put you on restriction to company area for 6 months, which of course didn't make any sense because in 2 months you were out of there, but you weren't going to have any fun. And a lot of these guys who did these things ended up as almost permanent KP, and that's a miserable job. And if you really give them a hard time, they put you down cleaning out the grease traps from the mess hall. And I don't think there's only one job in the world that's worse than the grease traps. And that's when I was in Vietnam, burning the shit at the latrines with kerosene. The smell is unbelievable. And it's like and if you get it on your clothes, you can't get it out. You gotta have them laundered. And anyhow, I was in Fort Bragg and getting ready to graduate from basic training, and they were reading off where everybody was going to go, and they read off my MOS, which was 11B10. And the guy says, "You're 11B10, light weapons infantry, and you're going to Fort Polk, Louisiana." And I said, "Excuse me?" So I didn't bitch right then. I waited until the formation was over, talked to my drill sergeant, and he says, "I don't know." He says, "According to your file, that's where you're going." I said, "Well, why would they do that?" He says, "I don't know. You pissed somebody off, or somebody knew you was trying to get even or something like that, but you're not going to get training school." So I called my father up on the phone one Sunday afternoon, told him, and he says, "I'll see what I can do." He says, "But there's probably not much I can do. If you have somebody who's mad enough at you to get your MOS changed," he says, "Son, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you." And my father fought in World War II, and he kept in touch with anybody who was in World War II in the Army Air Corps. And he was telling me, he said he got shot down 3 times. He said the last time he got shot down, his door hit the his knee hit the door jamb going out. And he says, there was a time my old airplane decided it wasn't going to fly anymore. I was going, "Not going to fly anymore. How many bullet bells?" He says, "Too many." I said, "Well, did you get hurt?" He says, "Yeah, I got hurt." He said, "But I lived through it." He said, "The way it turned out was I was put in the hospital. They sent me home. I asked to go back, and they said no. I'd done everything I could do, so they let me out." I said, "Yeah, but they retired you as an officer, right?" He says, "Yeah." He said, "But they never called me up. I tried to go in and fight in Korea, but they said I was too old because it would take me too long to learn how to fly jets." And he says, "I should have just stayed in, but your mother wanted me to get out, so I got out." And she was a good girl. Excuse me. And she wanted a family. So she got a family. And I went down to Fort Polk, Louisiana, which was everything that Fort Bragg was not. Where Fort Bragg was sand and hot and nasty until ended November. We got at Fort Polk, Louisiana in November, and everything was swamp and freezing cold. And it rained every day. And we ran. And we ran everywhere. Just like before, you don't stop running. They had this, most of their schools and their classwork was done far enough away where they couldn't get you to run that far early in the morning, so you'd have enough time to learn everything and get back at night so you could get some cleaning done around the area, get your uniforms in straight for the next day, shave, shower, everything. But they would load us in these big trucks and drop us off. I thought, that'd be a good job. Drive a long distance truck. My uncle was driving a moving truck, and I put that thought back here. I thought, when you get out, go see him. Maybe you can get your job. So I learned how to be an infantryman. And their big test is they take you up on Tiger Mountain, up on Tiger Ridge. And it's cold, and it's rank, it's nasty. and they put you in bivouac in the mud. And we had a good time up there. Had a couple guys that had brought some hooch back from their leave, and everybody was smoking this stuff, and they were all getting high, and I'm thinking, nah, you do something like that and they get caught and you can screw up everything. It's bad enough as it is, let's not make it worse. So I did. But we got to the compass course, and I had fun with the compass course. We ran the compass course in the daytime, and everybody was tripping over everybody trying to figure out how to work the compass and how to get where they're going without getting lost. And each squad had a piece of paper that said, this is where you're going to go and how to get there. When you get to your last azimuth, which is your direction count, you should pretty much have an idea where you should end up. If you don't see that point, you screwed up somewhere. Well, they did a lot of that in the daytime. The night course was a lot of fun for me. But the night course was even worse because these guys had no idea where they were. They couldn't figure out what they learned in the daytime went out the window at night. They couldn't, how did I do that? I've only learned this one time. How do I do this? Well, the squad I was with, guy said, does anybody know about this? And I said, yeah, I know. I was a Boy Scout for 11 years, so I can pretty much find you with a compass. So we put guys out in the line, and I would walk out to the line counting my steps, because I knew my step was 3.5 feet long. And that's the whole trick. How far do you go? Well, these guys had no idea what they were doing. And they were going until they got to the next point, and they think, I think we should stop and change. But if you know how long your step is, you know how long you walked, then you stop, you make your change, and you keep going. Well, we ended up right next to the Cobra battlefield training. And they had miniguns on these Cobras, and they were awesome. It would sound like a chainsaw. And they were shooting tracer rounds, and it's just like this big long snake up in the sky. And I'm thinking, man, is that what they have to help us with? This is good. Then we went through a cow pasture, and we went straight through, and they didn't bother us, and we didn't bother them. So we got through. I said, wonder what kind of cows those were. And I said, oh, those were Brahma cows. Didn't you see the hump on their back? Brahmas. They ride those things. Those things are monsters. I go, yeah, but they're on the other side of the fence now, so don't worry about it. We made one more azimuth change, and we got this cluster of buildings. And I think to myself, I said, there's only one place this cluster of buildings can be. This has got to be Tiger Ridge headquarters. Well, since we were playing war games up there, they had to get aggressors. And the aggressors were normally guys who had finished their AITs but hadn't got their other school yet. And they went up on Tiger Ridge and they wore jumpsuits and harassed the troops and snuck past their lines and captured their CPs. And when you can't capture the command post, the old man goes crazy and starts screaming at everybody. So we saw them, and they came out of the building and got in a truck and drove off. I went, just wait a minute. And we heard them go around to the main road and say, okay, let's go now. So we went in, knocked on the guy's desk, and he looked up and he goes, oh shit. I said, you can call your company commander or whoever in charge here and tell him your position has been compromised. It was kind of embarrassing for the Tiger Ridge guys. We were supposed to be out there getting lost, and we snuck in behind them and took over their thing and captured their flag. So we got back to the company area. The executive officer looked at me and says, you think you're smart, don't you? I said, no, sir. I said, it's just not something any scout wouldn't do. And he said, scout? I said, yeah, I was a Boy Scout. They teach us about compasses. Oh, so you've never been in the Army before? No, I imagine once to a customer. So he says, oh, okay. And we went back to our foxhole and said, you just captured Tiger Ridge, this is great. Yeah, I said, oh man, these guys, a couple of them had smuggled some booze up on the ridge. And they were drinking and having a good time until the aggressors got there, and the aggressors turned over the fact that they were drinking online. So there was a couple of guys who got Article 15s and drinking on duty, and there was others who were just miserable in the mud. Some of them started a mud fight, but when the aggressors came in and captured our CP, our exec went berserk. He came running out of the CP tent in his thermal underwear, screaming and yelling, "You bunch of idiots!" And there were a lot of words that I can't use here because I'm afraid my mom might see it. But we were there, I guess we were there about 5 days, and on the third day, we were practicing the ambushes and learning how to set up an ambush. And they had this thing, it's called break and run. It's your squad leader yell, break 30. And it's like, you stop, you turn around, and you run 30 steps, then you drop and turn around again. So I said, okay, so I learned how to do this, and we did it again, and here comes a group up the street. So we shot up a bunch of blanks, and he goes, break 30, and I turned around, and I went one way, and my knee went the other way. I wasn't happy. Hurt like hell. So they picked me up and put me in the Jeep and took me to the hospital, and the guy says, it's just strained. I don't think there's any permanent damage. So they wrapped it up in an ace bandage and set me back up on the ridge with a pair of crutches. And they said, you're no longer in the front. I'm going, okay, where am I? He says, you're in the rear. I said, I'm coming back here. He says, no, you got to stay up there, but you stay with the CP. I said, so I'm on duty, off of duty. Yeah. I said, all right. I didn't like slogging in the mud anyway. So we did this, and then the next day they had this thing called escape and evasion. And escape and evasion is just what it sounds like. They bring you in and they teach you about how to read the land signals and how to get places and navigate by the stars and know that the moon comes up at this point and goes down at this point. And you're supposed to be thinking about all this because what's going to happen is they're going to turn out the lights and you got whatever time you can to get back to your base. And your base isn't where you camped. Your base was back in the company area. So you had to escape and evade. I was the ultimate escape and evader. They put me in a Jeep that afternoon, sent me back to the barracks. Some guy carried my stuff up to the top deck, which is where my bunk was. Said, have a nice day. Glad you missed the evasion. I'm going, it really is true. I really did miss the evasion, didn't I? He says, yeah. He says, I heard somebody say you were scamming. I'm going, no, it's not a scam. It really hurts. He says, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to take a hot shower. So I did. I took a shower in about 20 minutes and let the hot water run out, and because there wouldn't be anybody there at night. So they started coming in around midnight, and they were talking about how they got away and this, that, and the other, and then they started counting noses around 2 o'clock to see who was missing, and they figured these guys got caught. And they had formation the next morning at 0600, and they had these 5 guys up in a line up in front of the troops and said, these guys got caught, and they gave up everything. They gave up their company commander's name, they gave up the first sergeant's name, they gave up the company area, they gave up everything. And they're on KP till we leave. So around Christmas time, they were going to give us 18 days leave out of our 30. We got 30 a year, and we were going to get Christmas leave for 18 days. So there was a guy who was getting out, ending his time of service, and he was chartering a plane to take him back to Chicago. And he was going to take a bunch of guys with him to go home for Christmas. Well, I heard that they were going to land in D.C. and then go to Chicago. So I said, have you got a seat open? And he said, yeah, it's $100. Well, I had $100. I hadn't spent any money in the Army. There's nowhere to go and nothing to spend it on. What beer there was raunch beer, and like we just drank Cokes and went to the movies, shot pool all the time. So I went home, and I had a good time in 18 days. And then my father reminded me that I had to go back. And he says, when do you go back? I said, on my birthday. He says, oh boy. I thought, this is my 19th birthday present. I get to go back and play Army again. So I did that. And then they picked us up in early February and sent us out to San Francisco and across the bridge to Oakland Army Terminal. And everybody went for the next duty station through Oakland Army Terminal. If you were going to Germany, you went one part of the place. If you were going to Vietnam, you were in another part of the post. But they needed the same thing that all troops needed and all posts needed. They needed work done. So people who had to pick up cigarette butts, people who had to rake leaves, people who had to pull KP, people who had to sweep the parade grounds. It was ridiculous. I was lucky. I didn't get it either day. They marched us through all the big boxes, and we got our clothes for jungle fatigue clothes and took them back to the barracks, tried them on. Yeah, they were all pretty good. The jungle boots were new. They were canvas sides, not leather sides. And we were told to pack everything up in these big boxes, address it to home, and leave it at the bottom of the stairs. They'd be picked up. So I sent out my fatigues and my stateside boots and everything. And the guy says, keep your Class A's, which is your greens, your dress green uniform. And he says, you guys who are free tonight can take a ride, go across the bridge, have fun in San Francisco, be back by 0600. Outstanding. So we all took showers and shaved and got dressed and took a cab across the bridge. I don't remember how much it cost. It didn't matter. I'd never been to San Francisco before, and I heard a lot of things about San Francisco. And the cab dropped us at Powell and Market Street, which is right in the middle of the business district. And the lights were on, and the people walking back and forth, this, that, and the other. And I was thinking about going to Fisherman's Wharf. And the guy says, now, let's catch the next cable car that comes by and see where it goes. So we did that. We caught it, and it ran into a dark residential neighborhood. And I don't know how long it ran, but it was a treacherous ride. Sliding one side to the other, everybody hung on for dear life. All of a sudden it was lights, camera, action, and we were in Chinatown. And I'm thinking, this might not be the best place for us to be in Army uniforms going to Chinatown. We went in one restaurant and had the best chop suey I have ever had in the world. We went to pay the bill, and they wouldn't take our money. They told us since we were going to Vietnam to free their people from the communists, that our money wasn't any good here. And we went in a couple bars, and it was the same thing. And they had Chinese New Year was big time celebrations. If you've seen the dragons with the guys in the sticks running underneath, they were there, dragons and firecrackers and perfume, incense, all kinds of stuff. Chinese musical instruments, and they were having a ball. We stayed there till, well, I don't know, about 1 o'clock in the morning. We decided we should get back. So we waited for the next cable car to Powell Street, and we got on. It took us back there, it took us back across the bridge, and we all settled in. So next day they pushed us up to Travis Air Force Base and we left the States. We got to Honolulu. I got my best piece of, where is it? Here it is. I bought a tiki. It's just a little plastic tiki. But it was my last legal purchase in the United States on my way to Vietnam, and I figured I should get something to help me. So, well, a lot of them were in the bar drinking. I had a Coke, and I got 5 of these little tikis, because I had 4 brothers. So I figured I'd send each one to each one, and then they could know that they were kind of protected. And I sent my mom mine to take care of it until I got back. And she did. She put it in a safety deposit box. Well, I don't know whether it worked or not because I got back. So, and I only got hit once. I hit in the ankle and it hurt like hell. I passed out cold. Anybody who says it doesn't hurt to be shot's a liar. They put us on this LZ one time, and they were building the thing, which means they just got an automatic building crew. A bunch of grunts came in. So we strung a concertina wire, and we filled sandbags, and dug holes, and moved things around, and lay jet fuel and oil on the ground for a helipad so dust wouldn't go flying everywhere when it's solidified. And then I ran into a buddy of mine that I hadn't seen since basic training. He said he was with the artillery, and they had brought these big 175 cannons out there. When they went boom, they rocked back on their big wheels, and they had them chained to the ground. They had taken big augers and bored down as far as they could and dropped concrete down there using quickcrete, and just dropped chain on them. And these things, they were crazy when they went. And I'm thinking, boy, if that chain ever broke, that thing got loose, somebody get killed. He says, yeah. I said, oh, all right. So we went to get haircuts because we all looked like a bunch of hippies. And we hadn't been to rear for months. And I got my haircut, and I was walking back to my position, going to clean up for dinner. And this guy hands me a rocket, and I'm going, fuck, rocket. So I turn around and hand it to somebody else, and there's nothing there with the barrel. Well, I wasn't training orders, but you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that if there's you and the pipe, drop it down the pipe and duck. I'd seen John Wayne movies. That's what they did. They dropped it down the hole and they ducked. I didn't know why they ducked until I heard, and that's why you duck. So I got up and turned around, and this guy's giving me another one. I have no idea how many they gave me, and no idea how many they shot. I dropped one down and came up real early, and just as I stood up there, the thing goes flying out of the tube. The concussion threw me about 15 feet. The whole side of my face was on fire. And they took me back to my hooch, and I sat down there, and I'm trying to get my senses back, and this guy gives me a cigarette and says, don't go anywhere, just stay here, and if you're tired, go to sleep. So I did that, and I was just about getting ready to lie down when I hear a bunch of guys gathering up on the wire, and they were going through the wire, and a couple of helicopters came, picked them up, and took them away. I'm thinking somebody's got to be in trouble, because those guys just went QRF, which is quick reaction force. So we were the guys that if somebody got in trouble, they brought us in to reinforce them. And I don't know how many guys went out, looked like about 15 or 20, and multiple helicopters. And we could look out in this, across the the way, and we could see the red tracers going up and the green tracers coming down. And that was bad because the green tracers were their tracers. And if they were coming down and our guys were coming up, that meant they were on top of the hill. They started this calling orders again, and I dropped more in the tube, and I couldn't do it. I just, my motor skills were not just up for it. So they let me go back and sit down. Then the helicopters came back and these guys got off, and they were real quiet. They weren't saying anything. They went to their different positions and laid down, and you hear a little buzz of communication, but that's it. The next morning we went up and they put us on helicopters and they took us out there to the bottom of the hill. And like we would, they had some guy come out and get us and lead us back through the wire. The NVA had gotten up on top of the hill, and they got up on top of the landing strip on their helipad. And they were running around shooting people and this, that, and the other, and the guys were trying to turn their weapons on them without killing their buddies. And then they sent a Gary pistol and they shot an aerial rocket, and that's what started all the mortar fire. And what they had done was they had called rounds on their own position. And what that is they call back and they tell us, you got to send rockets out to hit us, and hopefully we'll be in a good hiding position, we won't get killed. But that's the only way we're going to get out of this alive. Some of us are going to die, but hopefully some of us will live. And that's got to be the worst thing you can think of, after calling rounds on your own position. Because we all knew what the rounds could do. And being on the business end of it wasn't something you wanted to be. It's bad enough when it's them, but when it's your own guys, it's like, are you kidding? So we went on and they moved us out into the bush, and they moved us up north into the mountain area. And where we were, when we were down south, was dry and hot, the north was lush, and the jungle was thick. And we were wandering around one day, and let's see, where was it? We got onto Long Bend, and they picked us up on Chinook helicopters, and they took us up north. We got in, they landed on a helipad of corrugated steel that was surrounded by bunkers, and all these guys in tiger stripes. Well, it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out where you were, because they always put the Special Forces bases about one click from the border, so they can get in and out. The downside is after we got off at Chinooks and got our gear and got off and got ready, we moved west. Well, I was an old Boy Scout, and I knew that if you're about a click, which is 1,000 meters from the border, and you walk west for 3 days, you're someplace where you're not supposed to be. And then it was, oh yeah, and by the way, don't get in trouble because we can't come and get you. So no, this isn't good. So we're walking along, and we hit this old bamboo grove. It died the year before or something. And we got halfway in the middle of it, ants started dropping on us, and they were army ants, and they were biting the hell out of us, and we were going, oh, Jesus. So we got out of there pretty quick into a clearing. We had to take all our clothes off and beat each other, get the ants off, and we used precious water to get it. I mean, we had to carry all our water, you know, there wasn't a faucet to turn on and off. So every drop we used to get the ants off was less drops to eat, to drink. And we got to this one place, and they said, put everything out, and they gave me a Claymore mine to put out. And I ran the electrical pattern to the trigger out about 15, 20 feet. There was a little hillock out there. And smoked my last cigarette for the night, called my squad leader, tell him to come by and look at the cherry, make sure he's not screwing up down here. So he says, okay, only one thing, make sure you straighten out the pins on your grenades. That way if you need them, you're not trying to fool with the thing, you just pop it and go. I said, okay. Everything ran real good till about midnight, and I hear this noise out about 15, about 20 feet, and it sounds like somebody's messing with my claymore. And it had a plastic kind of sound. Well, that's what claymore is, a plastic horseshoe. And I had heard that when I was in training that what the Vietnamese used to do is be real quiet coming up, and to take your claymore mine and turn it around. And then they make noise, so you blow off the claymore mine and kill yourself. Now the mines had a 15-foot backblast, so if you're going to do it, you want to be in a hole. And this thing started messing with my brain, and I'm going, I got to do something. So I grabbed a frag, pulled the pin out, let the spoon go and cooked it for 2 seconds, and tossed it out by this little hillock I helped, and it went boom. And I hear somebody running through the jungle, and I grabbed one of the M16s, and I started shooting at him, and I was leading him just like he was a clay pigeon. And I heard something drop, and it's like, I don't know whether he's there, crawling away, and or what. So my squad leader comes around and he says, what happened? So I told him. And he goes away and comes back. He says, Major wants you to crawl out there and see what's there. I said, who's going with me? He says, no one's going with you. You're going by yourself. I said, no. This isn't smart. You're sending a rookie out there alone. He says, you won't be a rookie when you come back. Get out there. I went out and I crawled about 10 feet, and I said, this is stupid. I turned around and started heading back for my hole, and just as I get inside of it, I see my squad leader jump up and jump for the ammunition cache. And he starts to reach for a rifle, and I went, So I got up on my feet real quick, took 3 giant steps, said, Jack, which was his name, and he just stopped, threw his hands up, went, it's cool, it's cool, it's cool. I said, what are you going to do, shoot me coming back? He says, well, I didn't know if you were them or you. I'm going, yeah, you didn't bother figuring it out either. So, the Ranger really didn't make it on my top 10 list. But I figured that's the end of it, so I'll just keep on trying being a good troop. The next morning I got all my trip players and my claymores and everything back in, put my pins back in, my hand grenades, got everything back in my ammo belt. And we got and I ate a can of applesauce for breakfast, punched it all up so they couldn't use it again, just put it in the bottom of the foxhole, covered it all up, and lit a fire in there. And I waited and got the nod that we were moving in a particular direction. I turned and I started to go forward, and my foot had caught in a root. And I went one way, and my knee went the other. But this time I wasn't carrying 5 pounds on my back. This time I was carrying about 120 pounds on my back. Because I carried the machine gun, and that weighed 25 pounds. I had 150 rounds, and that weighed 25 pounds. I had 2 claymores, and I don't know what they weighed, but it was all weight. And when it was all done, I had about 125, 30 pounds on my back. Well, I know I've been losing weight because I hadn't been eating a whole lot. The stuff they gave us for food was ridiculous. I know people ate it, but I couldn't eat it. I tried to put it in with coffee creamer. That didn't work. I even tried once of lighting a match and pushing the charcoal in and stirring that in, give like some pepper. And that didn't work. And then I got some B2 units in a sea ration box, put all the salt and pepper in there. That I just could not eat the stuff. My mom was a good cook, so I was really spoiled. But this wasn't going to happen. So I went down anyhow, and my squad leader comes back. He says, "What happened?" He says, "Guy next to me came over. He says he fell." He says, "I saw him fall." He says, "He's not kidding." He says, "You sure you're not just fooling around and trying to get out of here?" I go, "It hurts." I had shucked all my gear off. I said, "I cannot walk." He said, "Pull your pants leg up." He did. It was all red. He says, "All right." He went out and came back with 5 other guys, and a couple of saplings and a poncho later, they had made a stretcher. And I'm thinking, they're going to have to carry me for a long distance, because I don't remember finding a clearing out here for quite a ways. And they did. They had to carry me for a long while. I felt kind of stupid being carried. I didn't have anything I could give these guys to help them out, so I sang them a song. They must have thought I was nuts or something, but nobody told me to quit. Each guy that came to be a new guy in the formation, I'd sing them a song. And it was custom of music. It was now music. It wasn't old-fashioned. It wasn't country. It was mostly rhythm and blues and some rock and roll and some blues. And we finally got to this mountaintop, and they put me on a stump. They said, "Wait here." So they called in a helicopter to bring in food and ammunition. They're always bringing in Class 5. You can get nothing but Class 5, that's ammunition. And they'll give you ammunition. They'll come real close to your site and kick it out. Then it's yours. They got this helicopter to come in. He says, "Hop to the helicopter." So I hopped to the helicopter. The crew chief got me on, yelled at the pilot, and the pilot took off low and fast. They got me back to the company area, which was about a half-hour's flight. And I went up to the orderly room, presented myself, told him I was supposed to come back and see the doc. He says, "Well, wait until tomorrow. Go find yourself someplace to sit, and I'll bring you some dinner." And I did that, and he says, "I went to smoke a cigarette." He says, "You can't smoke in here. Go outside." I said, "Oh, come on, I don't want to walk." He says, "Outside." That's it. This must be somebody's rule, and I'm not going to put myself in a position of breaking the rules again. So the next day I went up to the med team. Go running out again.
Okay.
They sent me up. They put me in the hospital, and they gave me a set of crutches. So I wandered around with my crutches, and I wandered up by the PX, and they didn't have a whole big. It wasn't a big PX. It was about the size of a small Quonset hut, and I found a couple things in there, and I found a statue about maybe 2 feet tall, and it was of an Asian monk. I thought that was good looking. See, it was nice looking. I found a lamp that had a corrugated shade to it. It had a wheel made out of spokes on the top, and every time you turned the light on, the heat would make the shade twirl. And it was all done in an oriental motif. So the wind looked like the trees were moving, and the water looked like it was falling, and the creek looked like it was running. It was a neat light. I thought my mother would really like this. So I sent all this stuff home. And the thing about being overseas is when you're overseas, you don't pay postage. You just write free. And but you have to rewrite your address so they can check on you, make sure you're not scamming or sending dope home in your boxes or something. And I talked to this guy, and he says, "Do you want to go and talk to your mom?" I go, "How am I supposed to talk to my mom?" And he pointed to the other side of the road. They had a Mars station. And I don't know what Mars stands for, but it's something like military airwaves, something. And what you do is you pick up the phone and you talk to somebody, and when you're finished, you say over. Now the guy on the ham radio on the other end clicks it so they can talk, and they say over, and it clicks it so you can talk. And I had done it with my older brother, so it wasn't new to me. He called me from the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He says, "How you doing?" I go, "WTFO." And he says, "Huh?" I go, "Well, WTFO," which is, "Huh?" And he says, "I get it." And so I talked to my mom for about 10 minutes, and then I had to get off. And I had an appointment with the major who was running the med unit, and I went back, and I talked to him, and I said, "You got any idea when I can get out of here, go back to my unit?" And he says, "Jim, they don't want you back out there." Then send me home. Just go relax. There's a movie tonight, go watch a movie, get a beer, sit down. So I did that. The next day, one of the orderlies brings me a fresh uniform, fresh boots, and a bag of records. He says, the bag of records is locked, you can't get in it. Don't worry about it. Put the clothes on, get the bag, get out to the helipad. You got 1 hour. So I went out there and waited. They put me on a helicopter, and they sent me down south. And I went to Cameron Bay, and I got off the helicopter, and this guy was sitting there on a mule, and he says, "Altemus?" "Yes, I'll get on." So he rode me over by this building that said the 130th evac. And went up, I tried the door, it was locked. I knocked, nobody came. Looked at my watch, I figured they're out to lunch. So I looked around and I saw this Coke sign on a building. I figured anybody who sells Coke can sell beer. It's a little early, but I'm not gonna be here long. So I went in there and got a hamburger and a Coke, a hamburger and a beer, and took a couple quarters. They had a jukebox in there and played some Jimi Hendrix and some B.B. King, and ate my hamburger. I was quite happy, thank you. And then I went into the other building, and they were open now, so the girl says, "All right, Jim, follow me." Gives me pajamas, get in the pajamas, got in the pajamas. Group came in, everybody stood by their bunk, and the nurse came in with a cart. Everybody got a cup of pills, and I have no idea what they were. I didn't know anything about pill warfare. I mean, there were a lot of guys who were talking about taking their father's pills or their mother's tranquilizers or their father's up-me pills or something, and it's like I didn't know anything about that. And I just figured, they're not going to give me anything that's going to hurt me, he said. So I took the pills, and I was there 2 days, and they got me on a stretcher, carried me into this big room at night, and there were a bunch of guys on the stretcher sitting there. We started talking. They said, "Where are you from? Where are you going?" He said, "Where are we going now?" He says, "Japan." "Japan?" "Yeah, we're going to Japan. You're going to be put in a hospital in Japan." Okay. So the nurses came around and strapped everybody in. Restraints for everybody. They don't want you wandering around. Then we hear this crump sound, and it's explosions, and they kept getting closer and far away and closer and far away. And here comes the nurses with steel pots and flak jackets. And I'm thinking, we're getting rockets, and we don't have any armor, and we don't have any flak jackets, and we're all gonna die. So they went around and poked everybody in the hip and gave us a tranquilizer shot and loaded us on this big jet. And away we went. And we got to Japan. And they put me in another hospital. Hooked me up to another helicopter. Went out through the town, dropped me at an air base. Put us on a bus and took us through the Japanese countryside. I got to see Mount Fujiyama, which is a really beautiful sight. I'd seen it in pictures, but it's really awesome in person. And the Japanese houses are just like they show them in the movies and stuff. Little sliding screens, very flimsy looking like, but it looks like it'll hold up. And they were really cute. So they put me in this other hospital. I was there for about a week, and the company commander came in and he says, "I need to talk to you." Went in his office and he says, "We're going to send you home." Okay. We're going to send you to Valley Forge Hospital. Okay. Can I make an interjection? He says, "Sure." I said, "Can you send me to Walter Reed instead? Because I'm from that area." I said, "My folks live right near there." And he said, "You'll heal better if you're around your own people. Call your mama, tell her you're going to Valley Forge, but you're not sure when." I said, "Okay." So I got a line in about 8 hours later and got my mom and told her I was going to come home. I'd be at Walter Reed. She was thrilled about that. And she says, "Are you hurt?" And I'm going, "No, I'm not hurt. I'm confused." She says, "Why?" I said, "It's a long story. I'll try and tell it to you later." So they sent me to Walter Reed. And we got to Walter Reed on a beautiful day in June. It was bright sunny skies, and where the rainy season was in Vietnam, I got nothing but the summertime right there. I think it was in early June, late May that we went. And so they went in and they put me in, took out my restraints and put me in a bed. I didn't think about much, and I'm still wearing these pajamas. So I'm thinking, well, I guess I'm a patient still. So I talked to this one guy and he says, "What do you think?" And I'm going, and I hear this real clack. And it's like, yeah, the door just locked, didn't it? Uh-huh. I said, "Well, that answers a lot of questions. Let's hope I can give them some good answers and get out of here." I didn't get out of there for 2 years. Off and on, they kept me in the hospital, and I took all kinds of tests. For a while I was working, since the war was driving me nuts, I knew a guy who worked at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, and he got me off the ward and got me a job. So I was working with the animals up on the top floor. And I felt bad about working with the animals till I talked to one of the doctors. He says, "Come here, let me show you something." And he picked up this rabbit, and the rabbit had a hole in its ear about the size of a quarter. And there was a filmy substance in the hole. And you could see little red lines growing in. And he says, I said, "What is that?" He says, "The rabbit's growing a new ear." Rabbits don't do that. They do what the medicine will give them. That's what we do here. Does that bother you? No, I don't think so. So I worked there for about a month, and I was talking to the guy who ran the place one day. He says, "Come on to my office, I got some things to do." He's in there, he's pulling teeth out of a skull and lining them up in a particular order. And he starts scraping off the stuff that's on the teeth, all the enamel and everything, and putting it back down. I said, "What kind of skull is that?" And he said, "Monkey. He killed the monkey. We had to kill the monkey." "Why?" "The monkey had cancer. I don't think I want to work here anymore." He says, "Okay." would you like one of these? I said, oddly enough, yes, I would. He said, well, I'll put you on my list. Come Christmas time, come see me. I said, okay. So I left the employment of the Institute of Pathology and went back to the ward and got a record player, and some people brought in music, and we'd sit there and listen to music all day long, and we'd wander out around. They had a beautiful rock garden there. We'd wander around the rock garden, go see the movies, go to the bowling alley, have a couple beers, and it's the only place where we could drink was at the bowling alley. We weren't supposed to be drinking at all, but first sergeant bowled over there all the time, and he goes, it's not gonna kill you. You're limited. 2, that's all. Okay, not a problem. So I tried to make it as pleasant as possible. And this girl I had met past Christmas kept coming down to see me. And I thought for sure I was going to be in love this time, but it wasn't. It's just infatuation. There was too many things that were different between us. And I had dated her before I went to Vietnam, and she was really upset about me going. You know, I wasn't all that unupset either, so. The pills that they were taking me started not to work, and the nightmares started to come. And I wasn't very happy about that. I went through a lot of changes during that time. I got to watch the television, and they were showing pictures of the Buddhist monks lighting themselves on fire in the middle of the street, protesting the war. I'm thinking, that is a serious protest. And one of the guys was there says, yeah, he says, they're Buddhist monks. They don't believe in violence of any type. I said, so what do you call that? He says, it's self-immolation. Okay? He says, they're sacrificing themselves to stop a sacrifice somewhere else. Okay? How do you know that? Oh, I was raised Buddhist. I thought, how do you be raised Buddhist and you're not a monk? He said, no. He said, my parents were Buddhists. But not all Buddhists are monks. We just believe. So, all right. I can live with that. He says, you're a Christian, right? I went, yeah, so far. He says, yeah. He says, there's a lot of different names for God out there in there. And I said, yeah, there is. And I started talking to this guy who was a minister. And I asked him about school. And I thought, of the damage that I caused, maybe I could do something better too. It has been done by others. They go back and we feel a real guilt. And try to assuage it that way. And so I fought the war against the war for the next couple of years. And I was in my car one day and stopped in a restaurant to have lunch, and the television came on, and the guy says, the United States Army has just invaded Thailand. And the first calf was in the spearhead. Casualties were heavy. I went crazy because I was in the first calf. I'm thinking, I know how they put them in there. They moved them one helicopter at a time, stopped them off and told them, get them. And when they say casualties are heavy, that means they're really bad, because they don't like to issue casualty warnings. When I was there, we weren't supposed to be there. And it was a different type of going around things. We all had to be very quiet. We weren't allowed to use our radio. The Thailand guys were definitely communists. We were supposed to wait for another unit, and we were going to go. We didn't go. I was glad. Thailand was something I really didn't want to see at all. They had the biggest trees there. I think the trees around here are big. They have really big trees, big mahogany trees. And they're humongous. And they get in, they live on the top of these cliffs. And when they die, eventually they just fall down in the hole. And the foxes and birds have a new place to nest. But to fight the war against the war, I wanted more ammunition. I went to colleges, I went to churches, I went to civic meetings, I went to demonstrations, I went to sit-ins. I wanted to find out exactly what everybody was bitching about. I know what I would complain about. If my son told me he was going to Vietnam, I'd do everything I could to stop it. My dad tried and he couldn't do it. And he knew some people who were pretty high up. And so whatever I'd done, I did it good. But I don't know, I guess 1972, when they went into Cambodia, I think it was 72, I went in, got in my car, drove downtown. I was furious. And they had demonstrations all along the mall in the Capitol, downtown. So I went downtown and I was going to look around for somebody to see if somebody was complaining or just demonstrating or marching or something about this latest idiocy. And there wasn't anybody there, so I said, well, I'll go talk to the boss. I grew up around Washington. I've been in the White House, I don't know, 8 or 9 different times. It was open. It's not like it is now. You have to have special permission to be in there now. They no longer just take Sunday afternoon meetings and go through and they had a docent who would take you around and explain paintings, and this is somebody's in Dolly Parton's room, Dolly Madison's room, and all the different paintings. And the one painting everybody shows up with Jack Kennedy and thought. And so I decided, well, I should go talk to the boss. So I went over and I drove my car around to where the east gate of the White House is, and it was partly open. So I pulled it up there and turned the engine off and got out. Here comes this guy running down the driveway, reaching for his sidearm. I said, I just fucked up somewhere. And I reached underneath my dashboard. I had a Carmen Ghia, which is a Volkswagen by another name. And I pushed the reserve tank button. And it has a real loud click to it. And I looked at this guy and went, well, it's armed. He got big eyes, big face, dropped his weapon back in his holster, turned and hauled ass. I thought, this is a good time to leave this place. I walked back across the street, across Pennsylvania Avenue, stuck my thumb out. A guy pulled up. I said, get out of here. He said, okay. Where you want to go? So I told him. And he got me close to where some friends of mine lived. I didn't want anybody to follow me, so I walked. And I got in their place, and the phone rang, and Kathy said, your mother called, and she says, the Secret Service want to talk to you. I said, uh-huh. She says, they're coming here. Oh, shit. So, you haven't seen me, don't worry about it, I'll explain it all later. and I ran out the door. We're done again, aren't we? All right. So they attempted to get me for breaking into the White House. I foiled that plan by tricking the guy into thinking that my reserve tank button was a bomb. And that scared the hell out of him, and he ran back up the driveway toward the front entrance to the White House, and I said, this is a time for me to leave. So I left. And I left the car, because I figured, this is from a helicopter, this is going to be easy to spot. So, as a person in Washington, D.C., in the springtime, everybody's downtown. Then they go through the cherry blossoms. There have been, all my life there's been Japanese walking around, clumps of Japanese, a lot of Japanese tourists. And every one of them's got a camera around their neck. And they go on big groups, they go on tours of industries and schools, even churches. And they do nothing but take pictures. They go reel after reel after reel. And when they come home, they get them all developed and they give them to the government. So the government can figure out how to de-engineer things from the pictures they took inside the plants. Only they had one plant that you couldn't take pictures. And they said, the first sign I see of a flash, I'm taking all your cameras and you can figure out who belongs to what. And then you'd be asked to leave. So, I mean, they went Ford, Chevy, all the big places, General Electric, all the big companies they went to. And my father used to tell me, yeah, they're all spies. Well, let's see. It's only been 5 years since World War II. Yeah, they might be wanting to get even. And it's the thing with Donald. Donald says maybe we had to give the Japanese and the South Koreans our own weapons. I'm thinking, yeah, but who says they're going to use them against the North? They may decide that they want to get revenge for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then we have a problem. Anyhow, they found me over at my friend's place, and these two nice young Secret Service agents, big boys in suits. You could tell they had guns and a little bulge in the side. And we talked a little while, why'd you do it? What was it? And I said, I didn't see any uniforms or sirens or anything. He says, nah, we're the Secret Service. We do things that nobody knows about. So I looked at him and said, okay, what happens now? He says, we're going to take you down and take you down to a psychiatric institute. I said, and stop right there. You're not taking me to PI, you're taking me to the VA in Washington down on North Capitol Street. I will go willingly. And these nice folks will receive a phone call an hour after I get there to know that I'm okay. That way the free press doesn't get the story in the morning how one of the hippies tried to talk to the boss and they locked him up for it. And the guy looked at me, he says, this isn't going the way the script went. So he made a phone call to his boss. Of course, they didn't have flip phones. You had to dial it. And he talked to his boss for about 5-6 minutes. And he came over, he says, no. He says, that's all right. He says, you sure you're going to just stay there? And I said, how long do you mean to stay? He said, till we tell you can leave. I can do that. It's a pretty open place. It's calm. We never had problems as far as violence there or anything. And they were always building the place up. Eventually, when I was there, they put fences all the way around it to keep people from wandering over and walking into the cafeteria and stealing a bunch of food and go back out on the streets. They survived any way they could. And they still do. A lot of them are vets. And they wanted to stay in the military, but when they got home from Vietnam, nobody needed them. So in the same way that they were in a crush to draft people, they were in a crush to get rid of them. That way they wouldn't be on the government's paycheck. I spent about 6 months in the VA. And it was off and on, because after I was there a month, I talked to the agent that was supposed to be watching me, and he says, you can go home for the weekend. He says, if you don't come back, we're going to pick you up, we're going to take you to PI, and then you won't get any privileges whatsoever. Done. I had everything I wanted there at the VA as far as purchases go. I didn't need clothes. I had pajamas. I had my own clothes I could launder. They had a canteen where you could buy cigarettes and Cokes, and the mess hall, you can get coffee and wander around. They had a little lounge up on the floor right outside of the mess hall, and it had benches in it, and there was little litho prints of things that Picasso did and Van Gogh did, and they're all in blue, and they're really neat pictures. And I said, I wonder why they picked these guys. One guy says, because it's supposed to look like us. Aha! Especially the one that, you ever seen Picasso's work, all the cubist stuff? He takes all these cubes and puts them together as people, or anything else. A dog in cubist looks really outrageously strange. Okay. I would get out of the VA, and I went to, of course, one of the first things I did was go to the next demonstration to hear what was going to be going on. I wanted to know if somebody was going to give me my opinion. I wanted to be there to hear it. They bothered me. If I'd have known I was going to be too close to this, I wouldn't have lived on Anderson Island. They don't do it much, so it's okay. They're just training for going back overseas. Poor bastards. Things kind of went on. I went from job to job, and like most of the jobs I had were delivery driving. It was something I knew. I knew the city. I was left alone. It was just what I wanted, and nobody bothered me. I had to get my flowers in the morning, put them in the truck, and get my list, and go all around the states, delivering flowers. And then 1 month I was delivering auto parts, and I had their van and their gas, and once a month we had to go to New Jersey to pick up parts off the ships. And they loaded the van up, and we brought it down and parked it, and the mechanics went out in the morning before we got there and stripped it all of all the parts and everything else, and then we started all over. But there was real problems. There was a big drawdown in Vietnam, and a lot of people I know were deathly still afraid of being drafted. They started the draft in I think 1941 during World War II, and so they were ready. They had an influx of soldiers. For Vietnam, they still had the draft going, but by 1970, they were drawing numbers, but they weren't calling anybody up. They had too many soldiers as it was. They were trying to back out of Vietnam and get everybody home, mostly get everybody out. And they had big problems with the soldiers at that time. A lot of them were on drugs and shooting opium or getting heroin or something. And there was a firm rule you couldn't go home if you were addicted. So you just had to stay and clean up, because they weren't going to send anybody home to mama's little boy and he's all strung out on heroin. And they were worthless. They were worthless. They put them back in the rear on the lines because they couldn't stay awake. They'd shoot up in hiding. Some of these guys just said, shoot between their toes. I said, well, I suppose, but why would you want to do that? Why would you want to get up in the morning, the first thing you have to do is take a shot of heroin, and the last thing you do at night, you take a shot of heroin? No, I don't think so. There were a lot that did. I know a lot of soldiers who had problems with it. Most of them have kicked the habit. They found that it was just as hard to get rid of it as it was to get it when they first found out about it. So they would spend 6, 8 months going through detox, and there was a lot of communes around that people were buying up mansions and opening the bedrooms to the vets and to the hippies that were strung out on drugs, and they were like farms, and you could come up and you paid whatever you could pay. They didn't care, and you stayed on the property until you cleaned up, and you were allowed one free shot. If you didn't do that in their time frame, you just got put out, and you had to deal with it on your own. And that's where most of them went bad, because they found out they couldn't deal with it on their own. Apparently it's just too enticing. And a lot of these guys changed from heroin to cocaine and found it wasn't the same high. But the hippies were using cocaine at parties, and then at the end of their semester, when they go to get their grades done and take their final exams, they get a hold of some speed, go in and study for 3 days, and then take all their exams, go home and crash for 3 days. And they thought, well, this is great. Yeah, right, great, until you saw some of their grades. It wasn't quite so great. They took all the tests, and they got some of the answers right, but most of them were strange answers. If they had to use a literary bent, so in English classes you had to write a short story real quick, and some of those stories were really wild. Two-headed people and dragons walking down the middle of the street, dogs with 6 legs, all kinds of wild stuff that these guys were making up out of their heads. And they were getting them from their drug highs. And they go out and play games with drug highs. So if I'm just making believe, I'm not doing anything wrong, nobody's going to bother me. So they didn't care. They just weren't paranoid. Everybody else who was worried about getting caught smoking weed walked around to get high, and then they start looking around. And it's like, if you're going to get high, go to your house, light the fire, turn on some music, and wait. And most people just said no, they didn't want to stay at home and get high. I went, well, okay, everybody got his own. I don't get high much anymore. It lost its appeal when it became legal. It really did. When they made marijuana legal in Washington, they put a whole new element into the mix as far as politicians go, because now more and more states are making marijuana legal. And one day the feds will change their mind. They'll be forced to. The populists are just voted in. And they're keeping now, just trying to stay ahead of where you can put an initiative referendum in on your vote, and then the people just vote on it. They're trying to stop initiative referendums, and they're finding out that most of the way they're written are constitutionally correct, and to stop them violates freedom of speech. And I watched the news last night, and the protesters from the last presidential election, they wanted the other guy to win. It was a girl, but they wanted Hillary to win, and Donald got elected, and people are protesting in the streets all over the country for this. Thousands of them. And one guy, senator from Ohio, tried to put a law across the books that said it was illegal to protest. And he said, people said, well, you have the right to freedom of assembly. It's guaranteed to you by the Constitution. He said, oh, well, no, those people are fine. We're just talking about the people who do economic hardship or violence to businesses or other people, and stops them from enjoying their freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. If you take somebody's livelihood away, that's just like stealing. And my act is, well, I can understand that, but on the other hand, all these people have insurance for such things. And if they don't have insurance, one, they're idiots. Two, they're not going to stay in business long. Because the first rock that goes through their big plate glass window is going to cost them $2,000 for a piece of glass. And I watched the May Day demonstrations, and they keep going. The last one was pretty calm. 2 years ago, it was really violent. I've tried to stay out of politics ever since the troubles in and out of Vietnam and the VA. I wasn't very successful in it, and they didn't appreciate my candor. I went through the Disabled American Veterans, and they had held me in the VA long enough to where they had upped my percentage of my disability by so many months. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I got out and they cut it in half, and I got a job, and it just wasn't enough to support me, so I got a job, then I got 2 jobs. And I made enough money to go to school with. I didn't go back to school till I was 27. Couldn't stand crowds. I came in out of the boondocks, and a group of 10, I got nervous. Going down to the demonstrations, I never hung out with the people that were doing them. I just kind of stayed on the peripheral of being there and giving my opinion, but trying not to get involved and get myself in a position that I become weak. Then I'm no good to anybody. So that did that. And that put the doctors kind of in control. I still see the psychologists, and they talk all the talk about PTSD, and it's difficult to explain. It happens to everybody a little different, and that's the problems they're having with handling PTSD. The vets go home and their dreams are different. They're not necessarily just memories. And a lot of times, somebody's got thought up stories to go with their nightmares to make them where they could compete in the world, and push that away. And it's fine until somebody pops your bubble and takes your story and goes, you either can't do that or you're not doing it right. Then you got to start over. And starting over isn't the best thing. Most of the time when they start over, they up and move cross country into another country, someplace where their identity is not known, and they can start it all up again. I never had that problem. I just wanted to work alone. I wanted a job that I could get, that people would just leave me alone and let me do my job, punch a time clock, and go home. I found one. It took me 12 years of working in the printing industry to get there, but I finally got into the stripping room. And that's where you put all the negatives one on top of another, and each negative is a different color. And when you get them all, it's all a bunch of dots, and it looks like a picture. And I got good enough where I could say to people, leave me alone and let me do my job. Even the bosses knew, just leave me alone. I'll get done with it as fast as I can and make it right at the same time. We had one guy who came in, who was hired as a night supervisor. And he came up one afternoon and he says, how long you figure it'll take you to take a job done? I said, I really don't know, boss. I haven't really looked into it yet. He says, okay, and walked away, and the head supervisor comes up, he says, what did you say to him? His wife says, he said you told him to screw off and you don't care how long it takes to get this job done. And what does that mean for me? He says, well, I have to write you up. I go, well, in the first place, it never happened that way. In the second place, I'm not going to sign it. Fire me? Fire me. But I never said anything like that. The boss up top, he knows that I wouldn't say anything like that. I've been here for 4 years. I never start trouble. I just get my job. I do my job. I go home. Working night shift is better too, because all the idiots go home at 3:30, and then the people who actually get the jobs done work at night without supervision. And I took advantage of the situation and working night shift, and I applied for commercial art school because I wanted to learn computer graphics, and there was a school in town that taught that. So I talked to my boss and I said, I want to go on day shift for 2 years. Why? And I told her why. He said, well, okay, if you want to better yourself, you can do that. So I switched shifts with one guy for 2 years. His wife was furious. She says she didn't like him working at night at all. And I'm going, well, it's not so bad. She came in and tried to get me to switch back. I went, no, you're a nice girl, and he's a nice guy, but for 2 years, I need this time so I can go to school. Going to school in the daytime there was the same as it was working in the shop during the daytime. Not much got done. Everybody talked, and they visited with their neighbors and all this other stuff, and it took 3 of them to get one job done, and eventually the boss would go, come on, break it up, break it up, break it up, get back to work. And I just couldn't do that. But I got my degree in commercial art, and I learned computer graphics. And I was fine. I went back to my boss with my diploma, and I said, now you're going to transfer me right to the computer room, aren't you? And he says, I'm going to try. So he went up front, and they said, you get the next opening. How long would that be? That depends. What do you mean depends? Either I get it or I don't get it. He says, well, let's wait and see what happens on that. 6 months after that, I got rear-ended. I had a bad case of whiplash. One of my spinal discs was cracked. I couldn't lift. I could hardly bend. I couldn't walk. They gave me a cane instead of crutches, so take your pick. I could drive short distances, but going to the grocery store was and still is an escapade. I can't lift those kind of weights anymore. I used to work on a furniture truck, and I could lift almost anything, but this has got me down where I can't do that. I go to the commissary, I come home, I lift groceries in the house. That's it. That's not a day's work, but that's all I can do. So I just do the best I can, I guess. And pretty much it's all been downhill from there. Every now and then I go in and get a checkup from the neck up, and that helps. Find somebody to talk to that won't put you down or think you're a little nuts, even though you might be. That's about it, Ray.
Great.
Joined the American Legion 4 or 5 years ago, and I enjoy being with the group. On Anderson Island, it protects my stability being a small group, so I don't worry about lots of crowds.
Plus you volunteer to be the historian.
And I'm the historian, so that's easy. It's not a hard job. It's confusing at times. Where do I park this in the scheme of things? And then I've got a lot of citations and letters that people have written to us for thank yous, and they're in a file. And, a lot of pictures, a lot of discs from interviews with the vets. And they're all pretty interesting. I watch them all, and it's like, you know, man, these guys really did a lot of stuff. It's like, I don't know, I never thought that my military career was something to get a hold of, but apparently it was high enough to have them want me to get out, so they retired me, and that was in 1970. I retired. I couldn't vote yet, but they retired me. And then I remember in 1972, Richard Nixon said he will give 18-year-olds the vote. And they did, so the 18-year-olds voted Dick Nixon back in. He said, I will end Vietnam. It took him 3 more years. He could have stopped it right away. A little negotiation. Give me 48 hours, I'll have everybody gone. But we made deals with people in Vietnam that we would protect them. And they wanted our form of government, not the communist government. The communist government was almost like a terrorist regime. They would come into a village in the middle of the night, hold guns on your family and the neighbors and tell you they want half your rice crop. And if you argue with you, they shoot your grandmother. If you argue again, they shoot your father. And then they take your 2 little brothers off to train them to be terrorists. And that's kind of why I went to Vietnam, is to help people who were under that kind of situation. Because I figured if I had a gun, I could stop somebody with the gun. And we used to go in squads. But I never had any problems with people in the villages. I know they talked with guys who said every time they went past the village, they got fired on. I said, not me. Never got fired on from inside a village. Never walked into an ambush. I felt extremely pleased to get out of Vietnam with my skin. I got hit once, and that was all I wanted to do. So.
You mentioned previously you got shot in the foot.
I got shot in the ankle. I got hit by some shrapnel in the ankle. Okay. And it's hotter than hell. I went, and the guy next to me goes, what's the matter? And I just passed out cold. And I heard somebody call the medic, and I blacked out for a while. And my eyelids started to flutter, and the medic got up and ran away real quick. Apparently they saw no blood, so I was fine. And I woke up, sat there, looked down at the place on my boot, and here it was, this little burn hole about like that. And I went back to my own position and took off my boot and looked at it. It was red, bubbly, everything else, but there was no blood. It disintegrated or something. And I mean, we don't know whether it was wood or metal or anything. A helicopter hit a tree, and a piece of it came flying into my leg. I was sitting down, so had it been 4 or 5 inches higher, it could have hit the femoral artery, it could have hit me in the head. It was just an oddball accident. Mm-hmm. And nobody ever said anything about it, so I didn't. I thought, yeah. I knew gun guy said, man, you could have taken that to be a Purple Heart and go home. I go, Purple Heart's for combat veterans. I said, how am I going to explain this to the citation? We've been lazing around all day, and it was so hot we made a hooch, big hooch, and a covering out of the sun, and we stayed there out of the sun, and Vietnam slipped away. And a couple of people passed joints around, and everybody got a good buzz on. Nobody seemed to bother with it. So then this thing with the shrapnel hit me, and I had first guard duty, and the guy said, what happened? I said, I got hit by shrapnel. He says, from where? I said, from the helicopter blade. That's impossible. See, I knew I shouldn't have told anybody. He says, you know what the odds are? I go, yeah, they're against me, but so what? If they come up, you won, you won. Well, I come up and I lost. He says, it really hurt that bad? I said, yes. I said, it burned like I got hit with a branding iron.
So what prompted you to get the ring in your ear? Where did that happen? In Nam? Or?
Oh, but yeah, a bunch of guys got their ears pierced. They used a gun that they had to, that's what they do in all the malls. Everything, you got a gun, you punch a hole in your ear, and you put an earring in your ear. And our squad, everybody got one. I got a gold one, and it went down. I was cleaning my ears one day, and it slipped and it went down the drain somewhere. So I went, I think I'll buy a silver one. It's cheaper, and the more I have to stay there, which it has. I haven't taken it out for years, except to clean. Had that. I had a bracelet that went around my wrist that had two dragon's heads, one on either side. And that was a nice one. Everybody had one of those. We had gone into one of those villages, and a guy came out with them, and he was selling them by the tray for $2 a piece. Well, they were silver, but $2 is $2. To those people, it was a lot of money. I got one. Chris got one. Bob got one. Somebody else got one too. And then we moved on out of the village. I lost mine. I was taking a bath one day out in the river. We all gone to this, we're forced in this river, and we didn't want to ford it because it was just too deep. So they were trying to figure out how we're going to reach our destination point and go around. And they said, all right, everybody take a bath. So we all took baths and down on the mud slopes and they were throwing mud at each other, having a good time. And then I got my little bar ivory soap. I swam out in the middle of the river and I was just paddling around, looking up and down, making sure nobody's going to sneak up on us. And then I hear them call me back in, so I struck out on a crawl and made it into shore real quick. Got dressed and we moved on. And nobody gave me a hard time about being out there. I got a lot of good exercise too. I love to swim. I can't put my arm above my chest too much anymore because of my neck, but I still try every now and then. I can backstroke and just float, but I can't go diving anymore, which is terrible because I love to dive. I had a ball. I bought all my equipment used. I always rented tanks. And when I got rid of it all, I got what I paid for it. So I thought that makes it even up. Plus I got the exposure and the elements. And the biggest trip that I ever had was when we went down to Key West. And they had a dive shop right there on the dock. And they had a poster that said, they'll take you out and drop you. So I talked to the girl at the desk and she says, yes, we have a class this afternoon starting at 2 o'clock for an hour over at the hotel, and we'll teach you how to use the equipment real quick, and then we'll go out to the reef if you can deal with the equipment. So we went over to the hotel that I was staying at, and I got to use the equipment. It wasn't hard to figure out. We went out to the reef, and it was about 25 feet down, not very far, but I jumped in, held my mask, got my breathing going, flexed my ears so they wouldn't pop on the way down, and they just went every 5 feet or my ears would go pow. And I got down to the bottom and it's like I was really disappointed. Everything was just dark green, gray, and it's like, man, this really wasn't. And at that moment, some guy turned a switch and he had a tripod set up over here with a bunch of floodlights, and the thing lit up like a cartoon. I mean, it was color everywhere. And the coral would flow with the tide. And my dive buddy, who was the leader of the dive, who was a dive master, she says, when you get down there, get your your flotation vest and set it where you come up a little bit when you breathe in and you go down a little bit when you breathe out. But because you're moving, you're not going to do that too much. It's just going to be gentle. And don't touch the reef. One, you'll kill millions of years of growth. Two, it's a federal crime. Don't take anything as a souvenir from the floor. Don't break a piece off. If you see a seashell out there, let it stay there. Because if they see you come back with a net bag around and you've got a shell to mark your trip, they're going to give you something else to mark your trip, which is a $1,000 fine and 30 days in jail. The U.S. Park Service is very serious about this. And they had this dive master, she showed me, we swam over, and she just points that way, and there's a big piece of brain coral. And if you've ever seen brain coral, it looks just like a brain. And it was about that big, and there's a big hole right in the middle of it. And I just couldn't believe what I saw. And when we got up, I said, was that somebody dropped an anchor? She says, yeah, that's exactly what happened. They were out here diving, and they dropped an anchor right through the brain coral. Put up their flags and went diving. Nobody knows how much they took from the reef. On the way down to Key West, there were rock shops and shell shops that you could buy Florida stuff. And they had a lot of them sold coral. It was all bleached out. But like one guy says, where's this from? He says, oh, this is from the Mediterranean. I said, you don't tell people that, do you? He says, nah, but I get tired of telling that lie. They keep saying coral fresh from Key West, and it isn't. He said, the Mediterranean's dying because people are taking it apart, and the poison that they're putting in the water and everything else. He says, one day it'll just not support human life. He says, and the Atlantic is going to go the same way if we don't watch what we're doing, putting poison in the water. That's just going to be one of those things we're going to have to live with. Hope it doesn't come in my life. That's about all, Ray.
Well, thank you for the interview. Appreciate it. And we'll put this on a DVD and give you a copy.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.